I'm Jeffrey James Higgins. I was a DEA agent from BA 111 in 1997, and I retired in 2017. So DEA's international focus is really important because illicit narcotics trafficking groups are all connected. So there's tentacles around the world, and if you want to actually affect the amount of drugs that are in the United States, you have to find source countries, you have to find transshipment countries, and you also have to attack the other crimes that are associated with drug trafficking, like weapons trafficking, human trafficking, and terrorism. It's essential for DEA to focus on foreign drug organizations, terrorism, and transnational criminal groups because the crimes that they're committing overseas all end up here. The United States is a major market for illegal drugs, and what DEA does overseas is develop intelligence and operations to go after some of the worst actors that are directly resulting in American deaths here at home. The DEA office in Kabul was closed during the Taliban regime. After the Taliban fell, DEA opened the office with a couple of agents who came in, I believe, from Dubai in 2003. John O'Rourke was the first country attaché in 2004, and I was the assistant country attaché. I came in April of 2004. So we had 2 permanent employees and 3 agents who had come from other offices for short temporary duty assignments. When we got there, we were based in the embassy, and the mission was work on the drug problem in Afghanistan, where 90% of the world's heroin came from, and also the highest concentration of terror groups in the world. So in the DEA Kabul country office, we were training the Afghan counter-narcotics police. This was a anti-drug unit that was established and based in Kabul, but most of the officers never even showed up for work. So we had to round them up, find them, and then train them with modern law enforcement techniques. There were an international effort for this. So we had trainers and mentors from France and from Germany and from other allied countries who were there trying to teach basic concepts in jurisprudence to the Afghan nationals, like the necessity for evidence and to prove somebody guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And then once we built them up, gave them some basic training in law enforcement, we took them out on operations in Kabul to start, teaching them how to get search warrants, how to work with the courts, how to actually execute arrest and search warrants on residences. And then slowly we built up so that we could reach farther out into the rest of the country. The goal was to project the rule of law to the outer provinces. As we grew as an agency and as the Afghan National Police grew, we realized we needed a more potent tactical response. So we formed the National Interdiction Unit, the NIU, which was a team that we could, using State Department INL aircraft, we could fly them around the country and go after high-value targets in the outer provinces, into places that were inhospitable for law enforcement or the rule of law from Kabul itself. So we formed the Foreign Advisory Support Teams, FAST, that was DEA's tactical team that could work in Afghanistan and in other countries around the world, because we realized we needed a little more firepower and we needed more training for DEA agents to be able to do their jobs in an active war zone. Afghanistan was the first time DEA agents worked in an active war zone anywhere in the world. And so we'd had foreign tactical teams in the past, but this was a different level of professionalism. We initially trained in 2005 in Fort Benning, Georgia, and we trained with special forces teams, we trained with the SEALs, we trained with various elements of the special operations community, with the goal being to be able to do DEA's mission with our foreign counterparts in Afghanistan and to be able to survive and execute operations in hostile environments. From when I first arrived in Afghanistan in 2004 up until about 2006, we were fighting with a lot of other agencies who refused to acknowledge the nexus between terrorism and narcotics. Based on all the intelligence, in most of the cases DEA did in Afghanistan, we were able to show that narcotics was fueling terrorism, not just in Afghanistan, but around the world. In 2006, we had a source, because DEA creates these wonderful source networks. And this source told us that Abdul Rahman, who was a Taliban commander, was looking to attack the Jalalabad airfield where DEA was located in eastern Afghanistan. The source had been tasked to acquire missiles as part of this coordinated attack against the airfield. The source identified Khan Mohammed as a Taliban operative who was working in the Chaparhar district in southern Nangarhar province in Afghanistan. And Khan Mohammed was both a drug trafficker and a terrorist. So this case was really important to us because it showed the nexus in a very strong way. Khan Mohammed was a heroin dealer. He had dealt opium before, and he was using his drug proceeds to further his terrorism. Khan Mohammed was the point man to lead this attack against the Jalalabad airfield. So we used DEA tactics, developing sources, recording meetings, getting Khan Mohammed on both video and audio, admitting to both selling narcotics and to planning this attack. We ended up seizing 2 of the missiles. They were Chinese 107 millimeter rockets that he was using he would use for IEDs to attack the airfield. And by the way, when we were at this airfield over the years, we were attacked numerous times where they'd use IEDs to try to breach the grates and then follow with small arms fire. So it was a very real threat. During the meetings between our source and Khan Mohammed, he admitted to selling both heroin, morphine, and opium. And our source negotiated for Khan Mohammed to send kilos of heroin to New York City. So that allowed us to use some of the long-arm statutes to charge Khan Mohammed in the United States. So we purchased, with our source, we purchased 2 kilos of heroin directly from Khan Mohammed with the plan that those kilos would go to New York as a test, and then we would later increase the amounts of heroin that Khan Mohammed was providing. After we did that, we also purchased some opium from him, and we revealed a large network of drug traffickers in that part of the Nangarhar province. Eventually, once we had him indicted in New York, we worked with the local police, and we set up a checkpoint, and we lured Khan Mohammed into Jalalabad, the capital of the Nangarhar province, and we arrested him at a checkpoint. Then he became the first extradition, the first arrest, and then eventually the first conviction for narco-terrorism. Based on DEA's intelligence over many years, Congress passed a 21 USC 960A. It's a narco-terrorism law that shows the linkage and the nexus between terror groups and drug traffickers, where a trafficker providing anything of pecuniary value to a terror group can be charged under this law. So this allowed DEA to charge people who were at the tip of the spear and who are actually directly funding terrorism and doing it in other countries. One of the top defendants that DEA arrested and eventually convicted was Haji Bacho. Haji Bacho was the world's most prolific drug trafficker. We heard sources talking about Haji Bacho back in 2004, 2005. He seemed to be everywhere. 90+% of the world's heroin came out of Afghanistan at that time. And it turns out Haji Bacho was responsible for 19.7% of the world's heroin, this one individual. He had a network that was based in Afghanistan, eastern Afghanistan. He also worked in Pakistan. He worked directly with the Taliban, so he was directly funding terrorism. And he distributed heroin and other drugs to 22 countries around the world, including the United States. So this was somebody that everyone thought was untouchable. He had judges in his pocket. He had politicians in his pocket in multiple countries. The amount of money that was going through his organization was absolutely staggering. If you think about, almost 20% of the world's heroin. So in 2006, we decided again to use drug tactics to go after these terrorists and drug traffickers in a way that a lot of other agencies don't do. So we developed sources. We found a source who had known Haji Bacho and Haji Bacho's family for many years. And we started doing recorded telephone calls where our source was talking about sending drugs to the United States. And Haji Bacho talked openly to him because of their prior relationship about drug trafficking. We bought 2 kilos of heroin. We wanted to be able to charge him in the United States with these long-arm statutes that we had available to us. And we had our source collect the heroin directly from Haji Bacho's residence, and then continued with telephone calls and acquiring more evidence to show where the drugs were going as we dug deeper into this organization and identified key laboratories that were all over eastern Afghanistan key people from money launderers to corrupt officials that were working and facilitating his organization. We ended up doing a search warrant in 2006. And because of the nature of where it was near the Achin district in the Jalalabad province, it was too dangerous to drive then. So we flew in with helicopters. And as we were flying in, I saw somebody running out of the back of the compound. It was actually Haji Bacho. He ran out of his shoes as we were landing there. So we missed him, but we were able to develop some evidence. We developed some sources who were in the compound. So it was a successful intelligence operation. So after we hit Haji Bacho's compound and didn't catch him, we then executed a search warrant on the Hawaladar. And this is the in a Sarafi market in Jalalabad in the Nangarhar province. This is a place where they launder money for drug traffickers. And we were able to seize ledgers that showed not just our 2-kilo deal, but dozens of deals from Haji Bacho and also dozens of other known traffickers in Afghanistan. So we're talking huge amounts of money. And the Hawaladar system works outside of the formal banking system. So it's a way for money to move around the world and have difficulty for any law enforcement to try to trace it. In 2007, DEA executed another warrant against Bacho. And during that warrant, they didn't catch Bacho, but they found a ledger in his compound in eastern Afghanistan. And in that ledger, it showed 123,000 kilograms of heroin in the previous 12 months. Just a staggering amount of heroin. It would be worth billions of dollars if it were all to come to the United States. Something like $250 million that were just sold in Afghanistan. It also showed his direct involvement with the Taliban and that he was funding them with tens of thousands of dollars regularly, and that money was being used to purchase weapons to go after American troops. So Bacho remained a target for several years until he was arrested in Pakistan. And then Pakistan agreed to turn him over to DEA, which they did. And then we eventually brought him back. We removed him from Afghanistan to the United States for prosecution. We had a trial in 2011, a long trial with a hung jury. We polled the jurors later, and several of them said anything law enforcement does is a lie. So like they went in there with that mindset. We reset and we tried him a second time with a shorter, tighter trial, and the jury was only out for a few hours and found him guilty. Bacho was one of the charges against him was later overturned because of a Brady issue. A Brady issue, there was another U.S. agency that had some information about Bacho that wasn't disclosed at trial because we didn't have it. But he still received 25 years, and then he was released probably 10 years ago. He was released after serving his sentence. So the DEA Special Operations Division has a 959 group and a 960 group. And these groups target drugs that are overseas, destined for the United States, and the 960 group specifically goes after people who are involved in acts of terrorism. Reza Olanjian was identified in roughly 2011 as an American-Iranian citizen who was living in Iran, who was looking to purchase surface-to-air missiles. So we opened a case on him because he was also dealing with drug trafficking groups in Tajikistan that were working with the Taliban. So drugs were coming out of Afghanistan to Tajikistan, and weapons and money were going back into Afghanistan. Reza Olanjian was looking for these Igla-S surface-to-air missiles, which are incredibly dangerous. They're man-portable, and terrorists around the world are always seeking them. These are like the gold standard for man-portable missiles. So we developed a source. We introduced another source. We did what DEA does, phone calls, talking to Reza Olanjian while he was in Iran, and we agreed to a meeting. So we set up an undercover meeting with our source and Reza Olanjian in Kiev in the Ukraine. And we met in a restaurant. I videotaped it with some concealed cameras. And our source and Reza Olanjian discussed purchasing MiG helmets, cylinders like nitrogen and oxygen cylinders for MiG aircraft and other military-grade weaponry, as well as these, he wanted 300 Igla-S surface-to-air missiles. Reza Olanjian was working directly for the Iranian Department of Defense. So this was a clear and present danger for our troops all over the world, as well as civilian targets. So we had multiple meetings between our source and Reza Olanjian when they agreed to work on numerous deals, including naval vessels, all kinds of aircraft, helicopters. And then we decided to find a way to do a test deal. So Reza agreed to receive 10 Igla-S missiles. And the plan was he would receive them in Herat, which is a city in western Afghanistan at the border. And then he was working with the Iranian government. So they were going to allow a cargo container containing these missiles to pass into Iran. They would test the missiles. And then if they were good, we would move forward with a 300 missile deal. So we tried to bring Reza Langian to the Ukraine again so we could actually show him some Igla-S missiles before this deal took place. And we had an issue with the Ukrainians. Everyone does not have the same conspiracy laws that the United States has. And they were going to arrest our source with Reza when they met to talk about this acquisition of missiles. So we decided not to do that. And instead, we set up a warehouse in Virginia. And we made it look like a Russian warehouse. So we had Russian music playing. We had AK-47s hanging. We had people speaking Russian. And then we had our source. We acquired an actual Igla-S missile. And our source on a Zoom call, we had spoofed our IP address to show that we were in Russia. And on a Zoom call, our source demonstrated this Igla-S missile while Reza watched. And during it, Reza's camera was covered with something yellow, so we couldn't see him. And he kept claiming he had technical problems. And in the middle of this call, while our source was holding the Igla-S missile, showing it to the camera, the post-it that Reza had been using to cover his camera fell off. So we have this very funny picture of him reaching for the camera, trying to turn it off, while in the picture in frame, you can see our source holding the Igla-S missile. So we decided we indicted him. We wanted to arrest him. We couldn't obviously get him from Iran. So the plan was to lure him someplace else. So we set up a deal for a Fokker aircraft, and we lured Reza Langian to Tallinn, Estonia. And when he arrived at the airport there, the police, the Estonian National Police, arrested him for us and held him. And then we eventually removed him and brought him back to the United States, where he faced trial. And in a fairly short trial, he was convicted and he received 25 years. When DEA first opened the office in Afghanistan, we were trying to stand up the counter-narcotics police, but we were also developing our own source networks. So we were trying to find out who was targeting the embassy, who was targeting the U.S. military, who were the major players in narcotics. One of our sources told us about a suspect named Misri Khan. And Misri Khan was a Pakistan national who had a dungeon in his basement, and he would capture people and torture them in his basement. He was a major drug trafficker. And involved in numerous other crimes. So our source met with him several times. We recorded meetings, and then I went undercover. So this was the first undercover since the Taliban fell in Afghanistan. And I met with Misri Khan in Kabul at a Turkish restaurant, and we discussed the possibility of sending heroin to the United States. We negotiated for 500 kilos of heroin to go to the United States, and we also talked about numerous other ventures that we could do together. He was involved with counterfeiting. He was involved with precious jewels, smuggling. He was involved with a little bit of everything. So we purchased a couple of kilos of heroin from him. We did it on the streets in Kabul. First time we did it, we had a very limited presence there. We had some Afghan national police who were helping us and supporting, but they didn't have a lot of experience in surveillance. And the first time we did a deal, I walked away after the undercover deal, and my cover team lost me. And so I couldn't just walk back to the embassy because I was posing as a journalist who ran a heroin organization in New York City. So I had to flag down a taxi and go to the airport and then get picked up later. Sometimes these things don't work out as planned. So we ended up purchasing 2 kilos of heroin from Misri Khan, and then we set up another deal where we could arrest him. We arrested him, but our surveillance was burned, and so we lost 2 of his henchmen, the people he'd been working with and coming to these meetings. One was his bodyguard, and the other was a gentleman who was involved, Haji Bahram Khan, who was involved with a lot of corruption. He worked for a member of parliament in Afghanistan, and he was also connected to members on the Supreme Court. So after we arrested Misri Khan, we started receiving intercepts that he was trying to kill both me and our source. So we had a hit team from Pakistan that was in Kabul trying to track down our source. So we played this game of cat and mouse for several weeks where we were trying to catch them before they found our sources. At one point, we received some information that the main bodyguard who was leading this team to find our source was at a body shop in downtown Kabul. So myself and another agent raced across town. We called the counter narcotics police to come meet us, and we got there first. When we arrived, I jumped out of the car, and I was wearing, tactical gear, a vest, and my M4 and everything. And Nurullah, this bodyguard who worked for Misri Khan, looked up and he smiled because I'd been meeting in these meetings with him for a very long time. And then he noticed my gun and vest, and the smile sort of melted off his face. It was a funny moment. But then he resisted arrest and fought us on the ground. We were rolling around in the street in downtown Kabul. But we ended up arresting him. And then from that arrest, we developed intelligence that Haji Bahram Khan, who was working with the corrupt officials, was in the area. And so a short time later, the CMP was able to conduct a traffic stop on him. He also fought and resisted arrest, but we were able to arrest him. In his pocket litter, we found the names of judges and phone numbers for politicians. I mean, there was so much corruption in Afghanistan, especially at that time. And he was connected to everything. So we were able to successfully arrest all three of the main players in this organization, but we were worried we couldn't hold them. So Congressman Kirk at the time met with President Karzai and tried and discussed having him become our first extradition case. But in the end, they decided they wanted to see if they could use the new narcotics laws and if they could try him in Afghanistan. So I ended up testifying in front of the Kabul Public Security Court. It was the first time a DEA agent I think had ever done that, certainly in decades. And Misri Khan received 18 years. And they'd also formed the new narcotics tribunal. So this was a central narcotics tribunal with new laws, with DOJ mentors who were trying to bring the law into the 21st century. And he was later tried there and convicted as well. So during one of my meetings with Misri Khan, I had a DEA Foreign Service national who was acting as my translator, and he was sitting next to me, and we were both wired up so we could record the conversation, because the actual conversation is the evidence. And at one point, he turned, and his recording device with the microphone fell out of his shirt and landed on the floor right in front of us. And he just looked at me with like pure terror and got up like he was going to run away. And I just said, pick it up. And then I distracted them with conversation while he was doing that. But I mean, these things just happen all the time. You can plan something out really well, and then the simplest thing can foul it. And this was a target who had a dungeon in his basement and liked to torture people. So it wasn't ideal, but it worked out. Operation Siege Engine 2 was a joint U.S. military and DEA operation. It was in the Low Chare Bazaar in Marja, Helmand. So this was a gigantic bazaar at the crossroads in the center of the Helmand province in southern Afghanistan. So it was both the Taliban headquarters and one of the biggest drug bazaars in Afghanistan. It was essentially two crossroads in the center of the province and four quadrants. And one quadrant was all weapons and military-grade equipment supplied by Iran. Another quadrant was all drugs. Another one was legitimate things that were sold at this bazaar as well. So Task Force 31, which involved Special Forces 3rd Group and the Navy SEALs and DEA FAST teams, the Charlie team and Bravo team, were all involved with this operation. So we flew in on helicopters near the objective. We moved in on foot to the objective. And then we took it over. We had contact with the enemy almost immediately. And up until that point in the war, this is 2009, up until that point, military targets would hit something at night because we had the advantage at night with our night vision and other capabilities, and then leave. But this time we decided to hold it. So we had contact with the enemy. We took over this bazaar, and then we held it for 4 days. And we were in intermittent contact with the enemy the entire time. So we had these teams on the ground, just constant firefights. We had support from B-2s that were dropping 2,000-pound bombs. We had A-10s coming in support, F-15s, all drones. We had Reapers that were dropping ordnance. And the initial count, I believe, was 60 Taliban that were killed during the operation. And it was revised down later, I believe, to like 48 Taliban. but it turned into one of the biggest drug seizures as well. There were 18,000 kilos of opium seized at the time. We seized a couple hundred kilos of heroin. There was morphine, and more importantly, in some ways, there was also a lot of suicide vests, detonation cord, instructions written in Farsi. We seized thousands of machine gun rounds, just all kinds of military equipment. So while we were engaged in this contact with the enemy over these 4 days, the Taliban was streaming across the border from Pakistan trying to reinforce. So it was a really significant operation in that it showed that the Taliban was using drugs to support itself, but also by taking out their headquarters, we seized a tremendous amount of intelligence, and we were able to set them back. I mean, the cost of what they could have sold all those drugs for was staggering. So it was a really significant operation, both for DEA and for the military. I believe it was the largest special operations operation since the initial invasion. So DEA has an incredible advantage over a lot of other intelligence agencies and other law enforcement agencies. DEA's ability to use drug tactics is exactly what we need when we're going after terror groups, when we're going after transnational criminal groups. I was one of the first people to get to the North Tower on 9/11 after it came down, and I joined the Joint Terrorism Task Force after that. And we used drug tactics, meaning developing human sources, finding people to arrest, flipping them, working your way up the chain. And within a very short amount of time, we were able to identify one of the people who was driving the hijackers around. And that was DEA using drug tactics. I was a DEA liaison at the Department of Homeland Security in 2003. And I was in a watch center where all the threats to the country were coming in. And every time a threat would come in, I'd go through the DEA databases, and I found an enormous number of DEA cases that were directly involved with the threats against our country. Because DEA has these networks, you could drop a DEA agent on the moon, and he'd probably come up with a source within a short period of time. So DEA's major advantage in these places is the ability to create human intelligence and then use it proactively, not just to write history books, but to actually find ways to prevent attacks, to find ways to stop drugs, to stop human trafficking, to seize weapons. And the intelligence services don't necessarily work like that, and other federal law enforcement isn't as proactive as DEA in this way. So, we're in probably 90 plus offices around the world at this point. It changes always, but that's an incredible network, and it's tied into terrorism and these other crimes everywhere. And I hope we continue to share and continue to work with other agencies, because pre 9/11, the stovepiping of information led to some very bad things.